Former champion Aljamain Sterling faces featherweight veteran Brian Ortega this Saturday in what is a must-win fight for both fighters. So in today's video, I'm going to take a look at the ways in which this fight could unfold, figure out exactly what's at stake for both guys, and stick around because I'll be ending this video with a prediction. Hello guys and welcome back to Alex on MMA. We've just hit 100 subscribers, a small milestone I know, but thank you to everyone who's subscribed so far. I truly appreciate it. And taking a look at this weekend's co-main event between Aljamain Sterling and Brian Ortega, it's a really good fight in my opinion that's going really under the radar. This is a former bantamweight champion against a title challenger up at featherweight, and this fight will answer a lot of questions about where both guys are in their career currently. Aljamain Sterling had a fantastic start to his featherweight campaign, falling short in what was a very close decision against Movsar Evloev. And Brian Ortega, is he past his prime? Quite probably, given his performance against Diego Lopez. He was comprehensively beaten at the Sphere over 3 rounds. It was that fight where Brian Ortega was knocked out on his feet and then reawoken by the follow-up shot from Lopez. So there is so much at stake in this fight. As 2 losses for Aljamain Sterling, I think that would pretty much take him out of the title picture. And for Ortega to get another loss on his record, that might have him asking questions of how much he does have left. Does he want to be a perennial gatekeeper for the killer featherweights coming through? So with that being said, let's dive into the fight itself. And there's a few ways in which this fight could play out. Given the submission threat from Ortega and the high-level wrestling from Aljamain Sterling, there's quite a high chance that a lot of this fight could be played out on the feet. And when it comes to striking, let's just be totally honest, neither guy is an elite striker. There's definitely holes and flaws in each guy's game. And if we're starting with Aljamain Sterling, one issue that he does have with his striking is he tends to maraud in with his hands fairly wide, winging his hooks with high elbows, and this does mean that he can get caught often. And we saw that happen in the Sean O'Malley fight. Now, I'm not comparing Sean O'Malley and Brian Ortega as par-for-par strikers, but at the same time, these kind of bad habits are things that Brian Ortega could pick up on when he's putting together his game plan. And when I do these pre-fight previews, even if a fighter might be slightly on the decline, I do try and analyze it as if we're seeing the best version of this fighter. As let's face it, we've seen that with Brian Ortega before, taking bad losses and then putting on a career best performance against the Korean Zombie. And there was one moment in that fight where the Korean Zombie just decided to come forward, didn't really care about his guard. Brian Ortega stepped out the way and landed a beautiful spinning elbow. And if Aljamain Sterling thinks that he has this fight won on the feet, he could quite easily walk onto something that Brian Ortega sets up. Now, because of the nature of this fight, it being grappler against grappler, basically, I do think both guys will fancy their chances on the feet because they probably think they're the better striker. However, Brian Ortega's stand-up game leaves so much to be desired. I just spoke about the impressive performance against an aged Korean Zombie. But his guard, we saw it in the Max Holloway fight, the guy gets hit so often. He stands with his chin really tall, doesn't really move his head, and takes so much punishment. This is a fighter who relies a hell of a lot on his chin. And although you don't see Brian Ortega getting sparked out, he has accumulated a hell of a lot of damage. And one shot that I think could be very integral for Aljamain Sterling is when he fakes going for a takedown and then wings that right hand over the top. We saw it land a few times against Calvin Kattar, and I just think against a fighter who stands very square like Brian Ortega with his chin high, this shot will be on all night long. So I am expecting some scrappy exchanges on the feet, and I'm not sure who I give the advantage to in terms of the striking. I think I can expect back and forth, some success on each guy's, but if Brian Ortega is expecting Aljamain Sterling to put it on him, don't be surprised if Brian Ortega tries to set a little trap, be it a spinning elbow or elbows up through the middle. I can see Aljamain Sterling getting cut in this fight. At the same time, don't be shocked if you see Brian Ortega walking onto some big punches from Aljamain Sterling either. But let's face it, stand-up striking is neither one of these guys' speciality. The wrestling and the grappling, which we're going to talk about now, I think that's an area where the fight will be won or lost. And when you look at Brian Ortega, T-City, his reputation of being an absolute killer off his back, how much truth is there to that? Because I looked at his record the other day, and when you look back at his submissions via guillotine, these were 8 years ago. And of course, you're going to speak about the Volkanovski submission attempt, where Volkanovski somehow got out of that guillotine. But remember, that was a mounted guillotine. It was incredibly impressive that Volkanovski got out of it, and 99.9% of fighters wouldn't have. But not only did Ortega fail to get this submission, it was also from a mounted position. And can you expect him getting down the superior wrestler of Aljamain Sterling? I just can't see that happening. So I don't see Brian Ortega being able to take down Aljamain Sterling. And if Sterling does take him down, and Ortega's able to recover some kind of guard. Can you see the submission threat really being a problem for Sterling? I just don't see the fight ending that way. I just don't think that Aljamain Sterling is going to be overly concerned by having Brian Ortega on his back. Now, lesser wrestlers than Aljamain Sterling might quite rightly want to get out of Ortega's guard and just work from there, but Aljamain Sterling's a different fighter. I can see him taking Brian Ortega down, and then he'll do what he always does, and that's looking for the back. He was a human backpack on Piotr Jan for the best part of 3 rounds in their second fight. And I think that this is an absolutely key area of this fight that's going to tell us how much Ortega has left in this game. Because if Aljamain Sterling's able to take Brian Ortega down, get to his back, and even submit him, then I think the mystique of Brian Ortega being such a jiu-jitsu specialist, I do think that goes. So how am I seeing this grappling playing out? Like I said, I think on the feet it's going to be very back and forth. I can see Aljamain Sterling trying to push Brian Ortega back against the fence and attempting some takedowns. And when he gets Ortega down, expect a patient progress. I don't think he's just going to lie on him and hold his weight like Hamzat did against DDP. I can see Aljamain Sterling really trying to work round to get the back of Brian Ortega. It would be a huge feather to put in Aljamain Sterling's cap if he's able to submit Ortega, and if he gets his back, holds on there, softens him up with some strikes from behind, a submission really could be on in this fight. I'm expecting Brian Ortega to be put in a few difficult positions, but there is a caveat to this, and one area on the ground in which I think that Brian Ortega could have some success is in the scramble. If he's able to reverse position against Aljamain Sterling, that could be a really interesting turn of events. Because I do rate Brian Ortega's mounted position as well. He's got a really nasty arm triangle we saw against Yair Rodriguez. So if he's able to reverse the position once Aljamain Sterling takes him down, that could be a whole different story. And despite being down on the scorecards, Brian Ortega could steal this fight. And with that being said, let's move on to my prediction. And like I said, the way that I see this fight playing out, I'm expecting a thoroughly entertaining first round. I think much of it will be fought on the feet. I can see Ortega stuffing a few takedowns from Sterling, but I do think Sterling's going to wear him down. He's got very good cardio, training with Merab. He'll land a few nice right hands to get Brian Ortega second guessing, and then I can see him taking him down, putting on the pressure, even taking Brian Ortega's back in this fight. I'm calling it right now. I think he's going to get that body triangle, have the back taken, and it'll be a very sketchy moment for Brian Ortega. But I think that Ortega will ride it out. He's got amazing survivability himself, and I can see Aljamain Sterling winning a convincing decision in this fight. I'm expecting 30-27, and I say that with a heavy heart because Brian Ortega has been one of my favourite fighters throughout my years watching the UFC. The toughness of the guy, his ability to come back when people write him off has just been incredible. We referenced the Korean Zombie fight earlier on. That performance was the pinnacle, I think, of Brian Ortega's career, and that was truly a time where Korean Zombie was rebuilding some momentum after his time off, and Ortega put on a fantastic performance. But in this occasion, I can just see Aljamain Sterling getting the better of him, outclassing him over the 3 rounds. And if he does submit Ortega, then he puts himself right back up there for title contention. So guys, let me know if you agree with my prediction. I really wanted to make this video because I think this fight's going under the radar, but there's a hell of a lot of ramifications for the winner. Let me know what you guys think in the comment below. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and I'll see you on Sunday after the fights.